And I would like to share, I don't know how much, but at least a little bit about spiritual warfare. And I was taught spiritual warfare as a young Christian, and never had much success at it. But Paul talks about spiritual warfare in the book of Ephesians. If I can find it. It's still in here, I know. I took spiritual warfare classes. I'm sure some of you have been in those spiritual warfare classes where they teach you to pull down strongholds, and they teach you that the cities have principalities and powers of darkness over these cities, and that's why there's so much darkness. In fact, I was told that the Northwest was the darkest spiritual area in the United States, that the strongholds of spiritual darkness was much greater over Seattle. And you know, if you get enough people to believe that, and this is what spiritual warfare is all about. The only reason we have not had much success with spiritual warfare is we haven't really understood spiritual warfare, except what we've been taught by the religious mind. But Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6, in verse 10, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, and in the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." Have any of you ever tried that? "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age or world, against spiritual wickednesses in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth." And I think I want to stop right there, because he mentions putting on, having your loins girt about with truth. Before you will ever experience true victory in any kind of spiritual warfare, your loins must be girded about with truth. And the loins represent the reproductive organ. And so what God is really after, we've already heard this week, God is after reproducing on this earth. Be fruitful and multiply. And when he said, "Be fruitful and multiply," he was speaking spiritually. So to have your loins girt about with truth will enable you to reproduce God on this earth. And really, that's a big reason why we're here. How do you have your loins girt about with truth? Is you first have to know your origin. And we've already covered that somewhat today, or this weekend. But if you know your origin, if you know that you were created, that spiritual man, in Genesis chapter 1, then you know that you are a manifestation of God on this earth. Until we have that revelation, and I don't say just knowledge, but until we have that revelation that we are the Spirit of God, or we are the Christ of God on this earth, you will not have hardly any success at all in spiritual warfare. And spiritual warfare is not about fighting anything on the outside of you. There are no demons in the airwaves, no principalities and powers over cities that can have any authority or any jurisdiction whatsoever over any child of God, unless they believe that those principalities and powers have that kind of power to suppress the Spirit of God in you. That's the only way the devil in any form or any what we call evil spirit or demon, the only way anything like that can have any dominion whatsoever over you is if you believe they can.
Amen.
And that's the reason that there seems to be so much demonic activity, is because 90% or more probably of the Christian world has been taught more about the power of the devil than they have about the power of God.
Amen.
You have to, you have to be fearful of your kids. It doesn't matter how much you love God or go to church or, you do everything within your power to teach your kids, but still there's that fear in the back of your mind that you've been taught that the devil's going to get them. And the devil's out to, get them on drugs and get them on... There's so little spoken about the power of God in His people. And that's the problem. So you cannot defeat a devil that has a lot of power. In fact, almost as much power as God. How could you, being a human, ever defeat a demonic spirit? Well, first we must realize we're not just human, that we are spiritual beings. And have been given the authority, in Genesis chapter 1, given dominion over all the earth. So we really, and I say we, God's people, are really in control of this earth. But the problem is we try to control the earth out here somewhere. We try to control the earth just like religion has tried to control us by our performance and by what we do to make ourselves better. But true spiritual warfare is simply knowing the truth. Having a revelation of Christ in you and knowing that He, and we've heard this for years. I know I will not say anything today you haven't heard, but it's always good to be reminded of what we know, or at least what we think we know. But He that is in you is greater than he that is in the world. And we've known this for years. Yet most of us stand in defeat because we still have the concept that our enemy is outside of us. And for some of us, that enemy is the devil. For some of us, that enemy or that hindrance in our life could be a wife or a husband. The hindrance in our life could be our preacher. And I can understand that, where Larry's concerned. But even so, there is nothing outside of you that can do anything to you unless you allow it. And that's why I mentioned the other night that God's intention is to incarnate in humanity. It's not a great mystery. It is a great mystery because it's hidden to this carnal mind. But when you really understand that God's intention is to inhabit in humanity. And that's why the whole Old Testament is a picture of that. And you remember when the 12 spies were sent out to spy out the land, there were only 2 men that said, we can do it. And those 2 men represent the spiritual men and women that God has raised up today in this hour. There is a group of people today on the earth who know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can take the land. Now, the land that we're taking, remember, there's nothing outside of you that needs to be taken. In your land that you have inhabited, I say you because you are a spiritual being that has been vibrationally lowered into this physical realm, and you have and must take dominion over your land. Now, we've forgotten, being lowered into this physical realm, that we have that kind of power. And all we've experienced is the power of what we call the carnal mind or the carnal nature has been stirred up by our religious teachers. Because all we're taught is the performance. Christianity as a whole has never entered into the new covenant. They are still under the old covenant in their teachings.